I refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.
This is Umar for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. I'm on Barry Jones's turf. Huge night in Wales tomorrow night. What did you make of Joe's shape up there in the way?
He looked good, didn't he, actually? I was also worried with Joe because he's such a big super feather. And obviously, career lightweight up until he decided he could win a world title down below. That it's always going to be a struggle. When you get into your 30s, you start to thicken out. But he looked good. I think he made the weight right. I think with Joe, he knows what he has to do. He moves away from home to train, and that gives him that extra discipline to not relent when you're making weight, make silly mistakes and go off and do stupid things. So he's focused all the time. So he looked good and strong at the weight. Rakhimov, who always looks drained because I think he got those naturally dark circles under his eyes. He looks a bit grey, but he looked like that against Alpha Barrett, and he was pretty fit in that fight. So it's not an easy night for Joe. I think stylistically he can put on a good show, but I think physically and mentally he's going to have to be switched on. Potentially you can stop him, but potentially he can get stopped himself. Or he can win on points, and the other guy can win on points. No, it's there you go. Thank you for that. But I think my big worry about Joe is that he's dining out on that punch against Ogawa. It's more than that. He's had a couple of knockouts, in the last sort of few fights, and then he thinks he's a puncher, which he can punch. Obviously, you can't deny that. But what's got him to where he is really, and throughout his amateur and pro career, is his sublime boxing skills, his ability, his mental capacity to see what's going on, to get out of trouble, move around the target really well. That's what's made him good. That's what I want to see. I think the thing with Rakhimov, he could knock Rakhimov out in the first round, but you've got to hold your feet. With Rakhimov, if you give him a smell of success, and he's on you, and he's going to be hard to stay off you there, because once he gets close to you, he didn't show it in himself a bad fight, but in the other fights, once he gets close to you, he moves around your body. And then once he gets on the outside of you, and he starts working away, he makes you turn, and you'll turn on the shots, and then the pressure's on, and he's physically strong, and he knows how to fight inside probably better than Joe does, because that's the way he fights. So Joe needs to keep it from distance behind the jab and make him turn on his punches, and that means throw the shots, constant movement, not away from the target, around the target. And that's going to be, so you take a half a step back and you pivot left or right. And if he does that, you turn the guy onto your shots. And then as the rounds go on, as we've seen against Alpha Barrett, Rakhimov squares his feet up when he's trying to close the distance too quicker than he wants to. And then when he does that, once he squares his feet up, then you can start holding your feet and landing those big heavy shots. But wait until you start to see a physical sign that he's starting to tire. Once he squares his feet up, then you can start cracking him with shots. But I think you've got to box smart in those early rounds.
Really do wish Joe the best of luck tomorrow night. Just a couple of things away from this I want to get your thoughts on, please, Barry. We've seen mega fights not get over the line recently, namely Fury Usyk. Saudi Arabia, as you would have heard, are planning a multi-fight deal with Wilder, Joshua and Fury Usyk in December. If anyone's going to pull it off, do you reckon it's the Saudis?
Yeah, pretty much. I do, but of course they will. And I hope they do. I really hope it happens. But we all get carried away. All the criticism that Fury and Usyk got for this fight that never happened, the fight was never signed. We're talking about a fight that was never signed, and completely never happened. I think we get too much information, like now, and we're going to get our hopes up. Just not worry about it. I got past caring. Listen, we want the heavyweight division to flourish because it trickles down to all the other weights. It makes boxing a better sport, and the heavyweight division is flying. We got and in the UK we got the best fighter on the planet in that weight division in Tyson Fury. So we want to see him in meaningful fights. I don't want to see him in another Chisora fight again. I don't. Like a Pulev fight. That does nothing for me. Nothing for me personally. But he needs to fight. He needs to stay busy. I want Fury to stay busy so he doesn't drift off and walk away from the sport, or switch off and get beat by someone who shouldn't beat him. Let's hope that happens. But until it happens, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia, and Lomachenko versus Haney next month, and Teofimo Lopez versus Josh Taylor the month after that, and Cameron versus Katie Taylor in May also. Let's worry about those fights. Bill and Smith versus Lawrence Okoli, an all-British world title fight in a stadium in Bournemouth of all places. And there's more better nights than that. Lee Wood versus Lara, Conlon versus Lopez, in Belfast, the greatest boxing city on the planet. Let's focus on the good stuff. The stuff that we know will definitely happen unless there's an injury. it's easy to be a pessimist in boxing. And when you talk about the heavyweight division, first thing we start to do is moan because we're teased and promised fights and they don't happen. So yeah, I don't.
And after all that, you've named a load of brilliant fights. I wanted to get your thoughts on one fight that hasn't been made because people do want to know, I'm guessing, your thoughts on this, on Wilder Joshua. How do you see that going in December if it does happen?
Well, if it happens next,
Yeah.
well, you've got to make Wilder a big favourite now because we haven't seen. I know the Joshua boxed really well against Franklin, by the way. He did box well, but there was no new answers to the questions that were still posed. I don't feel from previous fights, since the first Ruiz fight. The second Ruiz fight he boxed well, but he looked like a man who was waiting to get hit, and he still continued that in that vein. He still needs that more confidence in his touching with the shots. He's lost the confidence to punch through the target. That might come back, but we haven't seen it yet. So if he boxes Wilder now, you have to fancy Wilder. Whereas previously, a few years back, I always fancied Joshua because he was clean and direct on the route one, where Wilder was a little bit arcing with his shots, could punch from further out, but Joshua used to step in behind his punches, behind a solid jab, and now he's not quite doing that. With Joshua, there's a few little things that make him a better fighter again. It's all mental, but technically, if he steps behind that jab, just steps behind it. It's easier said than done when you're punching against big guys, but if he does that, then he's in range and follows through with that right hand. He's just at the minute, he's not quite doing that. So Wilder for me.
Barry, thank you for your time, mate. Top man.
I refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
And it must have been about 17, 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day,